I didn't really know what else to do. And one of the first things I did was to get people together, 20 people at a time, 25, 20 people in our conference room, and share the results with them and show them how bad it was, and to tell them we're going to have to make some big decisions here. I wasn't there just for the title. I was there because I wanted to make a difference. That was really the reason we were in so much trouble, is we had weak leadership. Why we were in a lot of trouble is we didn't have the right people in the right places.
Welcome to Escape the CEO Doom Loop, where we talk with real-world leaders about the challenge of building great companies without losing your clarity, energy, or sanity. I'm John Ninkovich, joined by my co-host Glenn Dahl. Today we're here joined by Richard Bryan. Richard became a CEO at just 28 years old, stepping into a business that was losing millions. Through tough lessons and mentorship, he transformed both himself and the company, and today he helps other leaders do the same as a Metronomics coach. Richard, glad to have you here with Glenn and I today.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks.
Well, Richard, so thanks again for being here. And like I said, this is Escape the CEO Doom Loop. John and I participated in a project that I think you know about, where we interviewed 72 CEOs, and the results, we wrote a book called The CEO Playbook, in which we really uncovered through the analysis about the CEO Doom Loop. And we talked about that a little bit. But would love to have you start off by introducing yourself and kind of your story and how you got to be a CEO at 28 years old. That's pretty crazy.
Yes, so I grew up in Bristol, England, and we had a family business there, which was car and truck dealerships. We were Ford main dealers, biggest Ford main dealer in the southwest of England. After university, I went to university in Scotland, and then I got a job with Ford Motor Company in the US as a graduate trainee. And I was sort of about 18 months into that program when I got a distress call from home that my father was sick, and I went home and joined the family business. The long and the short is the business was in trouble. And by the time I was 28, I was running the whole thing, which was absolutely crazy looking back on it. It was definitely a case of in at the deep end. So running a 100-year-old family business with 400 employees, 6 locations, 16 shareholders who all happened to be related. So it was great.
Wow. That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot for
Yeah.
sure. That's a heck of a story. So I guess the first question is, did you ever find yourself in the CEO Doom Loop? Did you realize if you were in the Doom Loop when you were in the Doom Loop? What was that kind of process for you as a CEO at the 28 years old?
Let's put it this way. I knew we were in trouble because we were losing millions of dollars and running short of cash. So, yeah, I think my definition of success was survival, is that we'll be here next year. So it was very short term, very tactical, a lot of firefighting. And yeah, it was tough.
So when you kind of took over, and that's in a similar situation, so I can relate to that. Didn't have 400 employees, but did you struggle when you got into that situation? Like, gosh, here I am. It's just me, Richard. I'm 28. I've never led a company of this size and scale. In our family future, our legacy of our family is on me. So that's an enormous situation to be in. Did you feel that way at all when you came back and realized the situation you're in?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it was a lot of pressure emotionally. It's not like, oh, if I don't make a go of this, I'll just go and get another job. I had all the family shareholders some of whom were relying on it for an income. I had all the employees. I had all the weight of that history on my shoulders. I'd grown up in the shadow of the business. So yeah, it was a huge amount of pressure.
Richard, how much time did you have experience in working in the business before you stepped up to start running the company as CEO?
I mean, I'd worked in the business since I was 14 years old doing jobs during the holidays, so I knew my way around the dealership. I left Bristol when I was 18 and went off to university, had 4 years in Scotland and then had a couple of years in the US. So I left when I was 18. I came back when I was in my sort of mid 20s. And it was just different because I was coming back in a completely different role. I was coming back expected to fix things, and I just didn't have the experience to be put in that position, to be honest.
Can imagine. How do you think the employees of the company viewed you stepping into that role?
And I think there was a mixture of emotions. I think some of the leadership team were definitely not that excited about having a 28-year-old as their new boss because some of them had worked for the company for more years than I'd been alive. It wasn't uncommon for us to have people that had been there 30, 35 years. The reality is there was a lot of complacency, and people just assumed that because we'd been there for 100 years, we would be okay. And there wasn't any urgency. And I think part of that was because people just didn't know how bad things were. There wasn't a sharing of information. And so they just didn't know.
So as a 28-year-old guy going to be a CEO for the first time, and everybody in the business and leadership team's older than you, how do you gain their buy-in? What were the things that you did early in that journey to start to change the trajectory of the family company?
Well, I worked very hard. They could see that I wasn't there just for the title. I was there because I wanted to make a difference. And I'd quit my job with Ford and flown home and joined the family business. I wasn't there just for the ride, and they could see that. And I think I was just very candid. I didn't really know what else to do. And one of the first things I did was to get people together, 20 people at a time, 25, 20 people in our conference room, and share the results with them and show them how bad it was, and to tell them we're going to have to make some big decisions here. And it's going to be tough, but we have to do something dramatic to survive because we're going to run out of cash in 6 months. And that definitely got people's attention.
Did you lose any of your members of your leadership team at that point?
Yes, we lost a couple of people, but I wasn't too sad to see them go, to be honest, because I would say I inherited a team of mostly B and C players. They were entitled. That was really the reason we were in so much trouble, is we had weak leadership. Why we were in a lot of trouble is we didn't have the right people in the right places.
Yeah, it always goes back to that, doesn't it?
Richard, one of the things we didn't touch on in the introduction was your book, Being Frank. And
yes,
my understanding is Frank is a real person, and Frank was a game changer for you.
Yeah, Frank. So I was fortunate that around this time, I was obviously fairly desperate looking for solutions. I was working extremely hard. You talk about being in the doom loop. I mean, I couldn't have worked any harder. I was just exhausted, and I was making incremental improvements, but I knew that actually we were going to run out of cash before the business turned around. So it was just not coming around fast enough. And I joined a CEO peer group at the time. And through that peer group, they were all much older than me, more experienced, and they're like, you need to get some help. You're not going to do this by yourself. And so I set out to find someone to help me. And that's when I found Frank. So he was a game changer for me personally and for the business.
Was Frank a coach?
Frank was a turnaround specialist, actually. He was a consultant, but he had worked at a high level in the automotive industry and had led several turnarounds. And he came and worked with me initially. It was supposed to be for 6 months. He ended up staying for 18 months in a full-time capacity, and then in a part-time capacity for a couple of years after that.
What were some of the biggest shifts that Frank, as your mentor and this advisor, started with early on? Like, what did you see? Some of the big ahas?
He was pretty quick to identify the C players. I get asked a lot, if you didn't have Frank, if you hadn't found Frank, would you have survived? And I think the answer to that is no. because I didn't have the confidence to make those decisions quickly enough. And he came in, he was 58, seasoned executive, had worked at a senior level for some of the manufacturers that we represented. He came in and very quickly identified who was not a good fit and moved them on. And then we replaced them with A players. And that was the single biggest thing that made the massive difference, that he did that so quickly. And at the time, I remember thinking it was a bit brutal because some of these people have been with us a long time. And I was 28 and I was like, wow. But he absolutely did the right thing. And with hindsight, that's what saved the business.
That's fascinating. How did you trust him and trust those recommendations that he was giving to you? How'd you get to that point where you just said, all right, let's go?
I think it took a little bit of time, because I remember when I first hired him, I said, right, Frank, what's the plan? And he said, we're going to make decisions every day and we're going to implement them, and we're going to get some wrong, but as long as we get more right than we get wrong, we'll get momentum and we're going to be fine. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm paying this guy a fortune and that's his plan. It was a little bit scary, but then I saw him in action. Of basically, we worked together and just learned a huge amount from him. But just seeing how quickly he made decisions in that turnaround scenario, we started making decisions very quickly to do things to generate cash, to get the right people in the right places, to convince the bank that we were going to survive, to convince our manufacturer partners that we were still going to be there, because either one of them could have finished us. If Ford Motor Company had taken our franchise away, or if the bank had introduced us to their special team that they kept talking to me about, which is asset recovery, we would have been finished.
Yeah. Richard, you and I have had this talk before. John, you and I have as well. And my ascension to CEO was pretty much in the same kind of way. The company that was losing millions of dollars as well. One of the things that helped in our success was the fact that I wasn't a legacy employee of the company. I was relatively new. I'd been there 2 years, and I didn't have that emotional attachment to the history, to the way things were done, and to the people. Because these are really difficult decisions. And the more you have that emotional legacy to them, the harder it is. And I know all three of us now working as business coaches with companies coming in, and we see it right away, right? We see a room, right? We're in our first kickoff session with our clients, and we're like, yeah, no, yep. But then to start really working with that CEO to build an A leadership team is difficult at best.
I think particularly with family businesses, right? Which was part of the challenge for me, is coming back into the family business where I've known some of these people for years and they've known me since I was a little kid, and that's difficult. And I did recognize that Frank would come in and see things far more objectively, and that was helpful. That was really helpful to me. And from a leadership team perspective, it was less of an issue for me because they were my father's leadership team. They weren't my leadership team, but it was still tough.
Yeah. John, what's your experience with this?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. Both in my growing up in family business and dealing with those exact same people situations and really hard business decisions that you have to make that are going to impact people. Yeah, exactly the same kind of stuff. And the reality is I see this with almost every client. So I do a lot of family business stuff, and it's the same kind of things that we can go into really quickly. Just see the things that are getting in the way of the organization sustaining itself and growing effectively. And always just coming down to, do you have the right people to help you do it, is a big foundational part of it. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. Richard, I have a question for you. I don't know the answer, and we can edit this out if we need to, but you talked about your dad was ill. Was your dad able to recover from his illness and be able to witness your turnaround of the family business?
Yeah, pleasingly he was. I mean, he was diabetic with a heart condition, and he had to have his leg amputated. And so clearly that was pretty serious. And he never worked full time again, but he was able to see us turn it around, which I think initially when he met Frank, he was unsure because he was very different. Like, my father was a little conflict averse,
Mhm.
Frank was the opposite. I mean, ex-special forces with a fine arts degree. I always say he's the sort of guy that could paint you a pretty nice picture, but you knew if you didn't like it, he could kill you. I mean, the guy was pretty intense and was almost the polar opposite of my father. And so when they first met, I don't think there was a lot of chemistry there, but I think he could see over time the job that Frank was helping me to do, and he respected that, and he was obviously happy with the end result. So
Yeah, that's fascinating. So did your dad question you? It's interesting. 'Cause I've been through the exact same situation with my dad. And I'll tell you, there's only a couple people in my life that affected me the way that my dad and my wife are the people that they really affect me when they say certain things to me. I remember some of my business things with my dad. Like he was really proud of me and what I was able to do, but there were a couple times like he asked me questions in almost like a doubtful way, and I was like, "Oh, like that really like." I felt that in my soul because his approval,
oh
recognition was the
yeah.
most important thing to me. Did you have that with your dad as you're going through this situation?
Yeah, I did. And I had a situation where he'd effectively retired, and then he felt a lot better after his operation, and he unretired. He just didn't tell anyone. And he came back in and he didn't recognize half the people there because we'd changed a lot of people. But he started telling them to do things. And so I remember phoning my mother, who was normally my biggest advocate, and said, listen, what is he thinking? Like, what's he doing? He's just come out. You can't come in and just start doing this. And she said, no, you have to remember that he's worked for this business for 45 years. He probably should have retired a few years ago, but he didn't because his dream is that you would take it on at some point. And so part of your new role is to figure out his new role. So it was a great reality check, really, to say, yes, you've been given a massive challenge, but you've also been given a massive opportunity. And you wouldn't have this if it wasn't for him. So then he became non-executive chairman and could attend board meetings if he wanted to, which he didn't. But we used to meet once a week. I'd give him executive summary of what was happening, some financials. We'd look at that for about an hour. Then we'd go for lunch, and we did that once a week. And it was great. And it actually was really good because I did seek his approval, as any son does from their father. And I think it was good for both of us, actually. It was challenging when he unretired, let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. I remember similar stuff, and I was like, "Gosh, I'm cringing," because he was going and leading and giving feedback that was different than the feedback I was giving. It was very similar.
It's confusing,
And I was
right?
like, I went to my oh, it's terrible. I felt my heart like, drop. Like, I'm like, what? I've done all this work. I feel so good at what we're doing. What's going on? Like, it was so frustrating. And you got through it. It's funny. Like, I got the same place where my dad was just like, all right, what's sales? What's our profit? What's our receivables? What's our cash position? And those are the things that he was most interested in, and everything else he didn't care about as long as those were good. But
Well, and
yeah,
I
it's
think the thing
crazy
is, John,
situation.
I'm sure you've seen this, and Glenn, I find when I go into a family business, they all think that their challenges are unique.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
actually, you could substitute the names from another business. It's the same problems.
Yeah.
Same.
Oh, yeah. And
Every
even
time.
really, I think almost any business, we all know this, right? Every business owner, CEO I talk to, say, well, Glenn, you don't understand. Our business is
It's
difficult.
different.
It's different. It's difficult. You can't understand our business model. Go back to, and then you start talking about their issues, and the issues are common, and they're almost always about the people, right?
100%.
For sure.
It's always the
Yeah.
people.
And I think the perspective of leadership as well. Like I had someone say to me recently, oh, you don't understand. Our industry is very competitive. And I was like, show me an industry that's not competitive in this day
Yeah.
and age, right? So I just thought that was kind of funny that they were like, oh, no, you don't understand. We're in a really competitive marketplace. I'm like, wow.
I had a manufacturing CEO challenge me once, and he said, well, it's not like I own a donut shop. It's a lot more complicated. And I said, hey, do you know what? I'm actually coaching the CEO of a donut shop, a chain of donut shops right now. Do you want to get him on a call and let's ask him how easy his business is? Because it's not. Richard, so talking about people, Frank sounds like an A player right off the bat. You didn't have a lot of A players, right? It's you had to really, right, part ways with people. How were you able to start building a team back up, and how were you able to bring and attract A players onto what sounds like a pretty dire situation of a business?
I think once we stabilized things, got to sort of break even, it became a lot easier because we were able to share our vision of the future. I realized that actually one of the best things that I could do for the business was to find the best possible talent and encourage them to come and work for us. And one of the ways I did that was a lot of times I would meet with people who I understood were A players from other businesses. And as part of the recruitment process, I would tell them, listen, if you are successful in getting this role, there's one thing that I'll promise you, and that's that I will not micromanage you because you have far more experience doing this than I do. But I have a vision of where I want this business to go, and you can help us get there. And that was very attractive to some of these A players because some of the people we recruited worked for public companies that micromanaged the hell out of them. And it was very attractive for them to be given the scope to actually come in and grow something. And I said, my role is to support you and help you get there. It's not to micromanage you. And that was very successful in recruiting some really good people. And I think I sometimes tell the story about I inherited a team of 12 people, only kept two of them. I think absolutely by the time I sold that business, I was the dumbest guy in the room. Like I had just some massive
Hmm.
talent. And I think it's being able to put your ego to one side, especially when your name's on the business, to say, actually, the most important thing is have the smartest, most capable people around me. And yes, they're going to challenge me from time to time, and I'm going to have to manage the egos and keep everyone swimming in the same direction, but that's my job. And if I can do that, we're going to be unstoppable. And that's really what I did. I had a fantastic team.
That's really interesting. Can I ask you a question? This is something that I hear a lot in my work. I'm sure you guys run across this too. And we look at businesses, and one of the things that have to put in place to grow the business is processes and procedures, right? Consistency of how we do things, whatever that
Mhm.
is. So when you think about processes and procedures and how that plays with micromanagement, Richard, how do you think about those kind of working in conjunction with each other? Because you have to have both of those things where you get a process of procedures in place and then a mechanism for creating accountability, holding people accountable. What would that really look like in your family business?
I think for us, part of the problem is we didn't have very good processes and procedures because we were running a high revenue, low margin business, and our financial controls were shockingly bad, and our reporting was very slow. An accountant who we recruited who was excellent, and he put in some fantastic systems. But importantly, Frank and I made sure that everyone on the team understood why these processes and procedures were important. Like, if we don't have this, we're not going to make it. There were certain things that were non-negotiables because we have to have these guardrails in place. But beyond that, you're free to create your own team, hire your own people. Come, if you have an idea for better ways of doing things, let's hear it. So I think it's getting that collaborative thing going with the leadership team. We had a silo mentality when I joined the business.
Mhm.
Parts didn't talk to service, service certainly didn't talk to sales. They were all trying to stitch one another up for their own good. We changed that partly by the way we paid and rewarded people, but also we let them know, listen, if you do things that undermine the dealership as a whole, that is not acceptable. That's not part of our culture. And by the way, we're also paying you a large part of your remuneration. You might be the service manager, but you're paid on the bottom line of the dealership as a whole. And that changed everything because then they suddenly realized that actually, if sales can have a cracking month, I'm going to benefit from that.
I'm curious, what was the difference from you? Because you had watched your father running the business as CEO before you, right? And you worked in the business. But once you actually, were sitting in that seat, what was the difference? Could you envision that sense of responsibility or no?
No, not really. Until I think, do you know the thing that helped me the most is that as part of my time with Ford, I spent 6 months with a dealer in Denver, Colorado, and 6 months with a dealer in Fairfax, Virginia, who were both outstanding. One on service and parts and customer satisfaction. The other one ran one of the biggest, most successful sales operations in the United States. And so I had a vision from doing that of what success looked like in this
Oh,
business.
nice.
And that was so helpful because when I came back to my own family's business, I went and actually mystery shopped all of our locations with like a
That's
baseball
awesome.
cap and a jacket on, and it was just horrible. And so I knew we was just so far away from that. But at least I knew I had this vision that I could see what that looked like. And I wanted us to get there as quickly as possible. And that was really helpful. And that's part of the reason I was able to recognize I need help and go and find someone like Frank, because I knew that the changes we needed to make was so big that I couldn't do it by myself because I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know at 28 which levers to pull and in what order. I
Yeah.
was literally just
Yeah.
firefighting. And so when Frank came in, it took a lot of pressure off of me.
That's huge. So, how long before you pull out of the chaos and the struggle that you were through, where you felt like you could get into a position to really cast a bit of a longer term vision versus just recovering to try to stay afloat? How long was that time frame? And then when you got to that, how far out in the future were you casting the vision? What did that look like?
So it was 18 months for us to get to break even. I would say by 2 years, I was starting to feel we were actually getting on the front foot again. And that's when we were hiring A players, talking about our vision. And that's when I spent a lot of time. I actually did a course at Cranfield University Business School, and it was a business growth program. It was a 3-month intensive program, and it was fantastic because that helped me put together a vision of what it was going to look like. And I knew at this point I was going to probably exit the car business at some point. Before Frank left, we set a goal that I would sell the car business by the time I was 40. And we ended up selling it when I was 38. So it took 8 years from that point to get there, but it was 8 years of saying, this is what that vision looks like. It'll be a multi-franchise business, multi-location. We're going to have these. There were certain things that we knew to maximize the value of that business, like 3 to 5 years of increasing sales and profitability, a really good mix of franchises that was attractive to the either larger family businesses or public companies. And that's what we built. So, yeah, so I would say it was 2 years until we really started working on that.
Richard, was that vision, was that something that you shared within the company? And was that something that was inspiring to others in the company?
Oh, definitely. We had a one-page plan. We had a one-page plan that we developed with our Vistage group. And the plan had everything we were going to do, everything we'd done on the left-hand side of the page, and everything we we're planning to do in the next. I think we just had 3 years out on the one-page plan, everything that we were looking to do in the next 3 years on the right-hand side of the page. And I used to give that to people when I was interviewing them and let them take it away. And someone said to me, aren't you worried about that falling into the hands of your competitors? I said, no, because they've got to be able to implement it. They won't be able to. It's all very well knowing what our plan is. Being able to actually do it is another thing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah.
That's so true. The ability to execute it's so hard.
Yeah.
Somebody could give you their whole blueprint for what they're going to do, but it's so hard to duplicate that for sure.
Yeah. And to execute on it, you've got to have the right team, not just right from an execution standpoint, but for your business, the right cultural fit. So they're truly a team.
It was motivating for our existing team, but it was also very helpful in terms of recruiting the right people to say we have a plan and this is where we're going, because it was exciting.
Was it difficult for someone as you? You were the steward of a family legacy that was how long? How old? 100 years? Or no, not 100.
Yeah.
How?
100 years old, yeah.
Yeah. So how difficult was that, or what was that discussion like within the family and for you to say, well, we're going to sell this business?
Could just see the increased consolidation in the marketplace. And we had a choice. We either had to get really big. We came to 118 million in sales, but we were still quite small. And so we were too big to be niche and we were too small to be a player. So even a regional player, we'd have had to get to 500 million. And we'd have had to borrow money. We were being asked by 3 manufacturers to build new dealerships. That was a minimum of 10 to 15 million each. I just felt that at that point in time, the risks outweighed the rewards in terms of capital investment. And we'd start doing a bit of commercial real estate just by nature of the fact that we were buying and selling large commercial properties. And we had a couple of people focusing on that, and they were making more money than the dealerships, which was interesting. And I never really felt we were in control of our own business because of the franchise model. We had basically 6 different franchises telling us what to do. And I could just see that long term, we were better off to exit and focus on the real estate, which is what we did. But convincing all the family that was a good idea was another story. That took some doing. And I had one aunt in particular who vehemently disagreed. She said, "You can't do this. This is my father's sister. You can't do this. We've been in this business 100 years, etc." And I said, by this point, I owned 55% of the shares. And I said, well, that's great. I take that on board, but I'm in the business and I see what's happening. And so I'm really telling you, this is what we're going to do. And these are reasons why. Anyway, after we sold in early 2008. By the end of 2008, the whole world had changed and the recession and new car sales in the UK had dropped 40%. If we had still owned the business, I think we would have survived, but we would have had to make some drastic cuts. And she started our annual shareholder meeting the following year by saying, "I'd just like to go on record by saying, what a great decision we made last year to sell the car business," which I found obviously very amusing that she was the biggest opponent
Oh,
and
so
then wanted
funny.
to take all the credit for it. So
She was a genius a year later.
with hindsight, she was a genius.
Oh, that's
It's
so
good
funny.
family business stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how it works. So, Richard, you're now coaching businesses using the Metronomics framework like Glenn and I. So why did you decide to become a coach? Like, what was that process for you and why did you decide to do it?
So I think the biggest buzz I got while growing the business was from seeing people grow, both personally and as leaders. And I think of one example is a lady called Louise who joined us as a sales executive, then became sales manager, sales director. She was running 3 brands by the time we sold the business and just had an amazing career progression and probably achieved more than she thought she was capable of. And I think for me, that was amazingly rewarding, like vicariously living that journey with her, alongside her and supporting her was just amazing. And I can think of lots of examples. And so when people say, "Do you miss that business?" I don't really miss that business, but I miss that side of it. I miss the people side of it. And so I was doing some keynote speaking, and from that was being asked to coach people. If I'm going to do this, I want to actually have a framework where I'm actually helping them to progress. It's not just sort of sharing the odd anecdote and tidbit of advice. It's
Yeah.
a bit more strategic than that. And so I knew someone who was a client of Metronomics, and that's how I got introduced to Metronomics. But in terms of coaching in general, it's just so rewarding to see your clients winning.
Yeah, I agree.
Uh,
Yeah.
It is.
yeah.
I remember when I was contemplating what my next step was, and I remember having a chat with my wife about it. I said, well, what do you think? What do you envision me doing? Or what would I be good at? Or something like that. And she goes, I don't know what it is. She goes, but I think you're going to be coaching people. And even then, we didn't know. I didn't really understand how we worked as business coaches and what that really meant. But it was interesting that she had that insight that long ago because I agree. It's the same, so many of the same reasons that love doing this.
Yeah. Mine was similar too. I actually had a coach I used in 2 different businesses that I was running. And gosh, she was so impactful for me personally. I mean, maybe more personally than professionally, but both like crazy. And he's the guy that said to me, he said, "Have you ever thought
Yeah.
about being a coach?" And I was like, I was running businesses. I really hadn't thought about it. And I did a little bit of work with friends that had a company and did a half a day of something, just kind of put something together. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, I had to go do this. This is like unbelievably
Yeah.
rewarding. And like you, I think I struggled a little bit when I started with, I was used to leading teams, being part of the team and leading teams. And then, yeah, I'm working on my basement office for a while. So that was a little hard to work through that. You just got to keep moving ahead and you finally get to breaking through on that, I think. But yeah,
Well, I
similar.
think that's why I wanted to be part of a coach community as well,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah, I agree.
otherwise you're sort of doing this in isolation. It's really helpful to have other peers that you can bounce things off of is super helpful.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree.
I can't imagine not
No,
having
no,
Yeah.
it. I really can't.
agreed. It'd be a lonely existence without that community, I think.
And Glenn and I talk about this all the time. We get together with our peers and we come back and it's like imposter syndrome. Like, I mean, we're working with some of the best coaches in the world.
Absolutely.
And you're like, are you doing this? You're doing that. Like, hey, I'm not doing that.
Like, wow, you
Like,
do
it's
that.
just, it's very humbling to be
Yeah.
part of our community in a really good
Yeah.
way. Cause I think it's just like the expectation level keeps going up. It's dragging you, not dragging you. You want to be a part of that, but
Yeah.
there's accountability to getting better as being a part of this group for
Always.
sure.
We're always challenging. I told John that when I came back from the Three Hag camp, was Shannon Susko hosted in Nova Scotia, 2.5 days of just 12 other coaches from around the world and just these intense, we're digging deep into topics and talking about how do we make our clients more successful and how do we be more successful? And that's how I came away like, oh man, I'm not worthy. And I'm sure so many people in the group hopefully felt that way. But we really do challenge each other. But at the end of the day, it all goes back to then us being able to serve our clients better and help them more.
And just being our authentic selves, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
bringing that to the table. Like, we've all got our own journey of how we got to this position. That's important, I think, not to lose sight of that. That experience is so valuable. And when I look back now, it's just madness that I was in that role at 28. I'm just pleased that I found Frank, who was 58.
Yeah. Really good point, Richard. What is it for you as a coach now? What do you take from your experience and what do you think you bring to your clients that you're working with from that background and experience?
I think it's that outside perspective, isn't it? It's much easier to look from the outside in at someone else's leadership team or someone else's business in general. And you haven't got those emotional ties. You're seeing it with fresh eyes. I think that's just so valuable. But I think also I was trying to get my clients to focus on the things that only they can do as a leader rather than getting sucked into something that someone else on their team could do. I mean, an example from my past would be I enjoyed sales, and sometimes I had a friend or family member that would come in and I would go and sell them the car because I could and because I kind of enjoyed it, but I wasn't really a good use of my time. And actually, it was worse than that. It undermined my sales
Yep.
team, who were professionals at that and did it all day long. And so I realized that actually it's kind of disrespectful for my team to do that. It's kind of like
Mm.
showboating. And it was actually Louise who told me that. We had a sort of 360 feedback. And I said, is there anything you want to tell me? She said, yeah, I really don't like it when you do that. It was great feedback for me to hear at the time because she said, I would much rather you came to me and said, here's a friend of mine, John. I know you'll look after him and just let
Yeah.
us do what we do. Frank always said, focus on the things that only you can do as a leader. And actually, it's a pretty short list, but it's really important. That includes finding the best talent for your business.
So, Richard, I love that story, but one of the most important parts of that, which I think is essential to it, is your ability to create psychological safety. So, someone like a Louise could actually provide you that really direct
Yeah.
feedback and you listen and hear that appropriately. So, how did you go about creating that level of psychological safety for her so she could do that?
Well, I think I touched on this earlier. Like I said to my direct reports, I'm not going to micromanage you. You're all far more capable. I could general manage a dealership. I could run a sales department. I was okay at it, but I wasn't great. And so I wanted people that were great. And so I used to run our sales meetings until Louise was just clearly better than me. I'm like, well, I'm just going to let her do it. And so, because again, it's an ego thing, right? It didn't mean I
Yeah.
didn't drop in and pay
Yeah.
attention and support her. But so that I set up a framework where once a week I would do an hour one-to-one with my direct reports. And it was their meeting, not mine. It was their agenda, not mine. And they had an hour. They didn't always need an hour, but they were able to bring what they wanted to the table. So if something was bugging them, they knew, well, I'll see Richard on Tuesday and I'll talk to him about it then. And they could just make a list of anything that was upsetting them, getting in their way, impeding them. And that was on Louisa's list one day. She said, yeah, I just don't like it when you do that. It's disrespectful to me and my team. And I was like, wow. So that's the thing. If you create that environment, you've got to be able to take it, right?
Richard, the other part about that's the story that you talked about is I recognize this as myself as CEO and many of the CEOs when I started working with them. I didn't know what my job was as CEO. There was no manual, no training. And so I thought in order to be the best CEO, I had to be the answer person. And, that
Yeah,
obviously
definitely.
there's the ego involved in that versus really understanding, leading the way and leading the vision and coaching and empowering the best senior leadership team. I didn't get that. It took me too long to figure that out.
One of my favorite moments with Frank was he said, you're trying to answer everything, even if you don't really have the experience to answer it. These people, they work for you. You've got to hold them accountable. And I said, well, yeah, but they're coming and asking me questions. He said, listen, no one walks into this office with a problem without having thought through a solution before they come in here. And he said, here's what we're going to do. Next time someone walks in the room, they're going to give you an issue and you're going to say, oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you think we should do? And they're going to say, I don't know. When they say, I don't know, you just pause for a minute and go, what would it be if you did know? And just throw it back at them. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, the guy comes in who ran our accident repair center. He said, oh, we've got a dispute on the shop floor. All the guys are down tools. They're sat in the canteen. They're refusing to work. And I said, interesting. What do you think we should do? And he said, I don't know. That's why I came in here. I said, but what would it be if you did know? And he immediately came out with this answer. And I said, that sounds great, Mike. Keep us posted. And he went away and Frank and I were just laughing. And Frank's like, listen, that's not your job. It's not your job as the CEO to go down to the canteen and talk to the guys. He's your body shop manager. It's his job. Now, you can support him and you can follow up with him and understand why that happened, but you're not the solutions guy. That's not your job.
That's awesome. We had Carl Saunders on a couple of weeks ago. He's got this little story talks about that. He went from being a founder to CEO. It was working with Shannon, Metronomics coach, but for him, the defining moment was when he was a founder, he was answering 95% of the questions. And when he became a CEO, he was answering 5% of the questions and 95% of the decision-making was happening somewhere else in the business. And it was interesting. I had a session a couple of days after that, and I kind of presented, Carl's thought on what it meant to go from founder to CEO. And the CEO who owns two companies that I work with was like, golly, I got to do a better job of being a CEO. You're right. I'm still too involved in all the decisions.
Yeah.
I got to give that away.
Yeah, that was a great. And I love the quote, Richard, like, yeah, what would it be if you did know? That's amazing.
Oh, it's so great. I still use that today, actually. It's just such a great reframe because it's not my job to answer that question in the same way as I'm not telling a CEO how to run their business. I'm trying to draw out of them what they already know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's something, Richard, I love the book. And I told you that. I love how it was written. I love the leadership lessons. It's a simple read. So I would recommend anybody order this and try to make Richard rich off of book sales, which I know is.
Yeah, right.
But leadership lesson number 12, never be held ransom by an uncommitted employee. Nobody is bigger than the organization as a whole. Talk a little bit about where that one came from.
So I had a sales guy called Henry, who was a senior salesperson, been with us for 20 years, sold, I don't know, 20 to 30 cars a month. Like he was part of the institution and he thought he was fireproof and he acted like it.
Yeah.
And so the thing about Henry that was destructive is he left a chain of sort of trail of collateral damage to the service department and the dealership as a whole, lots of customer complaints. And I finally just got fed up a bit and I fired him. And there was a sort of shockwave went through the dealership that I'd fired this guy. But what happened was the sales department as a whole came up. Like everyone else got better because they didn't have this prima donna running around bullying them, really bullying the
Yeah.
sales team and doing because he thought he could do what he wanted. And I think sometimes you just got to say, no, you can't. You cannot do that because you're undermining the culture of this business and the core
Yes.
values of this business. And if you're going to do that, you don't belong here. I don't care how many cars you sell. And so he left and yeah, he got another job at another dealership, but he probably went there. And I'm like, great, go and do that somewhere else because we were definitely better off without him. And our sales department as a whole did better without him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It always seems like it's a sales guy, doesn't
It
it?
does.
It's
Yeah.
a lot- There's a lot of this in sales.
Sales
I don't know
could
what
be
it
sales.
is, a lot of
I'd say a
ego.
salesperson, but yeah, that's
Or
right.
sales
That's
leadership.
that's a
for sure.
definite. I meet CEOs now and who have that in their company, and none of them want to believe that that person is really doing as much of the what Richard you called collateral damage. It's kind of unseen, and then invariably when they make that move, the right move, I'll always hear
Oh.
them come back to me and say, "Oh well,
Oh yeah.
now after they left, then 6 people came up to me and said, "Oh, it's about time. We were wondering," and all this information that comes out afterwards.
Yeah, and I think it's creating an environment where your team will actually let you know that someone doesn't fit and they'll be open and honest with you about that. And they'll tell you
Yeah.
why. Because they want the best for the business. And I paid them all on the bottom line of the business, which definitely helped reinforce that message. But it's more about culture. And I know we talk a lot about core values in Metronomics. It's just so important. And I just wish I'd had a Metronomics roadmap when I was 28. It would save me a lot of time.
Me
It
too.
really
too.
would.
I was
I
saying,
know.
yeah.
I wish I had a coach then. All right. I think Richard, this has been great. I love your stories. These are just real, the Frankisms, but also your real world stories that it's easy to see now how your clients are really getting a lot of value out of you as a coach because of your experience, but also your skill and your training now. But just curious, John and I would love, is there anything that we didn't ask you that we should have or anything that you'd like to throw out to us?
I think I was sort of thinking in advance of this, what I would tell my 28-year-old self. And I think it's, one would be to get a coach or definitely an outside perspective. I mean, I joined a peer group, which included some coaching, and that was very
Yep.
helpful to me. I think just focusing on the things that only you can do. But I think most of all for me, not being afraid to hire people that are smarter than you or real top-notch A players with a great attitude, because that makes all the difference. And I think looking back over the last 30 years, where I've been successful is where I've surrounded myself with the right people. Where I've been slow to be successful, even in my coaching practice, is maybe having a B or C player supporting me. I've now got an A player assistant, and it makes all the difference, in terms of freeing me up, both from a time perspective, but also freeing up my mental capacity to do the things that really matter for my clients.
Richard, I really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. Thanks for spending the time with us, and really love your story. It just it talks about really how does a CEO escape the doom loop. And I think one of the things you hit on is you need to hire people who are smarter than yourself, not be the answer person, which diminishes them, right? You want to hold them accountable. You want to ask them the questions. They've got the answers. They do. And really hearing your transformation as a leader. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me, John and Glenn. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. And to our listeners, if today's conversations resonated, take a page from Richard's story. Clarity, trust, and letting go are the levers that break the cycle. Thanks for tuning in to Escape the CEO Doom Loop. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode.